Hello, and welcome to the No Bad Questions podcast, where I try to learn in a conversational manner by sitting down with people who have interesting careers, important lessons to tell, or inspiring stories. I hope that you learn something too. If you want to support the podcast, please follow or subscribe on your platform of choice. You can also like or comment to boost the algorithms or share out to your network to make sure it gets more views. But ultimately, and what I hope you choose to do, is listen to the very end. With that, we'll start today's podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the No Bad Questions podcast. I'm excited to have as my guest today, although we're going to be talking about some serious topics, Commander Jimmy May, recently retired from the U.S. Navy. He is a retired Navy SEAL commander with over 22 years of service. He developed and teaches curriculum on combat leadership to all SEAL chiefs and OICs, as well as combat ethics to the Naval Special Warfare community and the Navy JAG community. Commander May has 7 deployments to the Middle East and has an array of awards, including 3 Bronze Stars and the Purple Heart. He has experience working across the globe in high-stakes situations to find common ground across a wide array of conflict scenarios. He completed his undergraduate work at Texas A&M and postgraduate studies at Harvard as an alumni of the Program for Leadership Development. Jimmy is CEO of Sushi Assassin, an in-home sushi catering business for private events, and CEO of Mayday Executive Services to help companies develop camaraderie and unit cohesion through shared intense experiences. I'm not sure if we'll get to that today, but that sounds like a lot of fun. He serves as CEO and a board member of Beyond the Brotherhood, which is what he's here to talk about today, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping Navy SEALs of character transition from the teams to the civilian sector, and is sought after as a keynote speaker for events across a wide variety of organizations. Jimmy is fluent in Arabic, an avid spear fisherman, a surfer, martial artist, and amateur beekeeper. He resides in Ocean Beach, San Diego with his family and prides himself on doing good things for good people. Jimmy, thanks for being here with me on No Bad Questions.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, David.
So can you elaborate on what is Beyond the Brotherhood?
Yeah, so Beyond the Brotherhood is a 501c3 organization that we started to help team guys, Navy SEALs, I call them team guys with character, graduate to the next mission in life. There's a lot of issues that face. It doesn't sound like it's that big of a deal, but what ends up happening is at the end of guys' tour in the SEAL teams, they're kind of lost for what the next steps are. And I know I was for sure. I was fortunate to run into some really amazing business mentors. The guys at Pray.com were huge for me, Steve Katina and Mike Lynn and Matt Potter, and just kind of coaching me and teaching me, but not everyone has that. And so we want to kind of provide those steps for these guys because for the most part, they don't have social media. They kind of spent their life in the shadows. Self-promotion is not something that most guys do, even though some do, but most of them don't. And so we wanted to screen and take the very best guys, the most high character guys out of the SEAL teams and place them into their next mission in life. And so that they can kind of reap some of the benefits of the society that they help to build and protect.
Is it harder? I know that transitioning to civilian life is hard for a lot of veterans. Do you feel like it's harder for somebody that's so specialized into what I perceive, layman's perspective, to be combat roles like Navy SEALs? Is it harder for them to find their spot in the civilian world?
Harder is is not the right word to use. It's different. Our guys, for the most part, it's a different pool of people than the regular military. 70% of our enlisted guys are coming in with degrees. The preponderance of our officers are Ivy League guys. What an E6 does in the Navy is going to be a lot different than what an E6 Navy SEAL does. Like I've spent a little bit of time in the Navy before I came to SEAL teams. I'm not going to, kind of downplay what happens in the Navy, but an E6 in the SEAL teams might be running a 300 person outstation on the edge of the empire, interfacing with heads of state on a daily basis. He's not someone that's going to be interested in coming in and working on an assembly line. And the fact that most of them are very well educated, what they lack is a current network. And so at Beyond the Brotherhood, we bring these guys in, we give them those last couple bits of training, whether that's they got to finish a master's degree or they got to get some kind of qualification. and we farm them out to these companies to get a look at them. Maybe they do an internship for a couple of months, or we put them in touch with some people at higher levels in the industry. And it kind of gives them the opportunity to figure out what it is they want to do, because, we've just been off the grid for a little bit, and but they're gifted individuals, and most of them are ready to work.
Okay, that makes sense, and really helps educate me on some of the differences, as you highlighted, not necessarily harder, but different. One of the other things you said in your mission and even in your bio was around Navy SEALs of character, and to me, that's like synonymous. Are there grades even within the SEAL community of what you define as character? That's interesting.
Yeah, they're obviously, there's different levels of people in every organization. And, I want to make sure that we're only taking a couple candidates a year. I'm a bit of an elitist.
Gotcha.
People know my reputation in the teams. And so I want to take, in order for me to create that demand signal on the demand side, which is with the businesses and corporation we work with, I need to make sure I have the highest quality candidates coming out. And I don't have all the bandwidth in the world. There's me and then my partner, Sean Murphy, who just retired actually in January. There's two of us, and we don't have that kind of bandwidth to help everybody. So we'll help a couple guys and get it moving. And once this thing gets moving, then, we can move on.
Oh, I love that. And so really kind of, I like to use metaphors and to me, in my head, it's basically like you want the A+ students, if I'm hearing you right.
We do the A+ students who are of high moral character. Like, I think what I've learned in the SEAL teams, we've got such gifted individuals, guys who are so smart, so strong, so, just gifted. But that moral edge is what really makes the difference between, someone who can make decisions and I can trust in really high stakes situation. So that character, I used to be the executive officer at Buds, and we tried to shift from, recruiting for pure physical prowess to shifting for that character. Because what we found is, like, if I get a guy that can't swim fast enough or can't run fast enough, that's a lot easier thing for me to fix than the guy who has a character flaw. Right.
That's really fascinating. And I feel like that switch maybe gets switch in approach or whatever gets left out of all the different Discovery Channel stuff about your universe, which is the extent to which I've ever had any window into it. So I appreciate you giving me that sort of layout, and it makes sense that you're trying to do, with just you and a partner. It's there's bandwidth considerations, mentorship, meaningful mentorship, and networking assistance. That takes a lot of time, and so I definitely get that. If people out there want to,
you're frozen right now, so I'm not hearing you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I was saying that I really appreciate that and that perspective. And what I was then beginning to wonder as we talk about this, if somebody's out there like myself or an executive at a company and they want to help, how can they help either your organization or other veterans that are, making the move? How can they help participate in these elite people making a transition to civilian life?
So there's lots of organizations out there that support different veterans groups. Our share of the task is specifically on Navy SEALs, so I can speak to that. I know how they can get involved with us. I mean, obviously, if you go to the website, it's www.beyondthebrotherhood.org. There's a link that says, contract our staff. That's me. They'll go right to me. So get your email. And, if you're interested in becoming a partner, if you want to be someone that wants to, be a mentor, a coach, if you have jobs available that you think that would be helpful for these guys coming out. If, we have events, we had the Pit Stop Challenge is going to be an annual event. We did this last one in January. We worked with, if you've never been on the NASCAR guys, they're great people. And we were working with the number 8, number 3 car down North Carolina and their pit crews. And we did pit stops on cars. And it was a donation event. So people would donate and buy a slot. We had a couple CEOs come down there and leaders of industry. And then we had our guys mix in and we did pit stops on cars. And it was kind of a team building exercise. Phenomenally well. Just the guys down at RCR, which is Richard Childress Racing, just did a great job. And then we've got another one coming up in November, which is called the Triple S, Shoot, Shift, and Save. And that's going to be an event where we'll have 3 different teams and we'll have 3 different stations. So day 1, you'll work on shooting. Day 2, and then you'll shift station. You'll work on driving off road. So we have Humvees, and you'll learn how to understand what brake throttle modulation is. You'll understand what the tire patch is doing. How come your limited slip differential doesn't work well off road? And then after that, we'll shift over to a medical section. And in the medical section, you'll get qualified through the American Red Cross for CPR. That's both people and children and babies. You'll get qualified on AED use and then also on stop bleed. So you'll leave with 3 qualifications. The second day, after you do all that training, we're going to have a competition among the 3 teams. There'll be, our donors participants, and then there'll also be team guys who are our candidates who are worked in. And for us, it gives us a chance to, work with regular people and kind of, break off some of that salt that we have acquired over the years. And then for our donors, it gives them a chance to get to know, hey, these are the people that you're meeting. And you think, yeah, it's a SEAL's a big thug with a gun. Yes, it's also a guy who's well educated and is used to working in teams and can work agnostic of rank, because in the military rank is a big thing, but in the SEAL teams it's not that much. Ain't nobody listening to me just because what I got on my collar. And the SEAL team's reputation is huge, and you got to cultivate it every day. So I think it's an important thing. Like these events, if people want to get involved in that, please come do that. And there's, I'm new to this. If there's something I'm missing, like, hey, you guys should really do this, and hit me up. However you want to help. We'd love to have people get involved. We're building a community here. It's not something I can do alone.
Awesome. And let me flip it a little bit before we move on to our next topic. One of the things that's hard for me as a civilian to empathize with, to put myself into the headspace of a special warfare soldier getting out of a career in the military and trying to move into civilian life, is what kind of job they would want. You mentioned they're not going to want, an assembly line. Cool. Got it. I live in the healthcare universe, and I try to think like, okay, what would be the right type of thing that's going to give them purpose that may or may not, because healthcare is dominated with a lot of licensed professions, so they may or may not be qualified for the licensed profession, but there's plenty of non-licensed professions inside of healthcare. So when I think about that, I think about what would even attract, a former SEAL in a role in my industry, or in general. What do you think attracts those types of individuals?
So we're small enough to we don't have a one size fits none approach to any of this, and all the guys are all over the map. Like they come out, and I've got a guy interested in crypto and NFTs, and I've got another guy who wants to go into finance, and I've got a couple entrepreneurs. One guy is starting a business where they do edible landscaping in Hawaii. Really cool. He's getting out, and he'll be one of our candidates. And we're doing a newsletter on him. And basically, it's like, instead of growing a lawn, especially in a place like Hawaii, why not grow, stuff you can eat and nutritious for your family? So that's all over the map. And even if it's not the right industry, like for me, my mentors are the guys that run Pray.com. I talk to them almost every day, and they just coach me through. I'm not in the ministry. I'm not in the that space. I'm not even in the internet or media or any of that, but they've just been really, good allies in pushing me down the road. So, if you're just someone that wants to help, and the mentorship thing is weird. It's got to be some kind of personality bind. It's not something I can really quantify, but when 2 people click and they get along, man, it's a powerful thing for, helping these guys get a foot up. And, down the road, we've only been doing this now for 1.5 years, but in 5 years, we're going to have guys who are higher placed up. And I think that's where the magic is going to be for these guys when they get out, that continued purpose. And I know, we're going to talk a little bit about suicide here in a minute. And, I think that's one of the problems we can get after.
Yeah. And I think that 2 things. I think you're right that the work you're doing now is foundational to longer term dividends coming in, as your network is successful. Hopefully, they then are going to sort of I hate the cliche of pay it forward, but give back to then the next rank of folks that are coming out, and the next rank and the next rank, over time. So that makes a lot of sense. The second thing is kind of what you just mentioned, and is the other reason I asked you to come on today, is I've read a lot about this, veteran suicide. I think that many people are aware of it. Many people might not be. And I feel like one of the big reasons is about purpose after service. You get out of the military service and you have trouble finding purpose. And so that's part of why I asked about, like, what would somebody look for in a role? But just opinion. Let's start with, what's your opinion of why veteran suicide is just so bad, so prevalent, so frequent?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm pretty sure the SEAL teams lead the league as far as, like, by percentage of guys killing themselves. I can't speak to the society, to the military community writ large. I've been 22 years in the SEAL teams. So I can't speak to that, but I can tell you what my opinion is for our guys. Number one, our guys are pretty beat up. Like, by myself, I've had both my hips replaced. I've got a torn labrum right now. I had to straighten my nose out a couple of times because it's been broken so many times. Our guys are beat up, and we're just learning about traumatic brain injury and what that does. And, like, the explosions that we're exposed to, the amount of rockets we fired and IEDs that blow up around us. And, I personally have been around 3 houses that blew up, and, it's a pretty big ding it takes. So I think that there's some damage in the neural pathways that I really can't, I'm not smart enough to articulate clearly on. That's one. Number two, I think it's when you're part of a community that's really tight, like in the teams. I mean, when you're in the platoons, you're gone 300 days a year with these guys. My first 14 years of my career, I was gone 300 days a year until they forced me to go on a shore tour. And, you live, eat, sleep with these guys all the time. And it's the same group of guys. And then when you get ripped out of that, the guys kind of lose their purpose. And I think the thing about purpose and buy-in is that it's not about what the organization does for you. It's what you do for the organization that builds purpose and buy-in. Like, think about your parents. They've given you everything, and you probably don't appreciate them. Or I talk to my mom, probably once or twice a week. But the SEAL teams have been blown up, frozen, shot, just beat down for years and years. My body is broken as a result. And you know what? I love the organization. I love the guys, and it's just, I sacrificed so much for it. I just don't want to lose it. And so when I was looking at what I want to do when I get out, I had a very marketable resume, and I got offered plenty of things. And I was like, what I really want to do is just, be able to continue to contribute to this community in some way. And so what I think the magic is going to be is not what we do for these guys on the backside. I think as they get up and they start making it in these organizations, I think the magic in getting after that suicide problem is going to be, hey, wait, I've got this job. It makes tons of money. But you know what? I have a chance to get back on the ground with the guys. We're going to work with some donors, and it just gives them a purpose beyond, and money's important. I'm not going to lie. Like, we all have to have it. But it gives them a purpose, and they don't have to maybe like dedicate their whole life to it, but they can stick their toe in, they can stick their leg in as much as they need to, to kind of keep those roots in the community instead of just getting ripped out all at once. Cause it's a painful thing.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding you. A big part of it, you feel like, specific to the SEALs teams, is just, you're not only losing your job and your career, you're losing all your brothers.
Yeah.
Not losing. I mean, they're still there, but
not the same. You go back to the team and it's, the old guys, but the young guys you don't know. And they're like, who's this dude, walking around. Right. I think providing guys a chance to continue to give back, I think will be powerful.
Okay. I think, despite feeling like suicide has decent awareness, I feel like it's still not enough awareness. And everything these days is an epidemic. There's the opioid epidemic, and there's the obesity epidemic, and there's the veteran suicide epidemic. Do we need some word or concept or something that's stronger than epidemic? Because I don't feel like it's sinking in for people.
Yeah, I know, and I've thought about that, and I don't know what the right word to put on it is, but also I don't know that it's that we need to make the whole world aware. We just need a couple people who are committed to the cause, because that's kind of how I look at it. I'm not looking at like everybody in the world stop what you're doing and go to this cause. I think that we need a couple people who are committed to the cause to look at it, think about it. A couple quality people. That's always my answer is quality leadership, and I think that's what we need getting after this problem. And it's not going to be something where we can just this is it and we fix it tomorrow. It's not a pill. It's going to be a long process. And you know what? We're on the path with Beyond the Brotherhood. Like, we don't know the answers. We know what the problem is, and we're starting to work. Like, I'm looking at the mountain, I'm on the path, and we're taking a bite at a time and working our way up it right now. Our top goal this year is to figure out what the top causes are of, the guys killing themselves. And my retirement was December 16th. And then, 3 days later, investigation is still pending. So I'm not going to say it was suicide, but it was a gunshot wound killed someone who was very good friend of mine, who was at my retirement, and everything seemed great. I don't know. I don't know what to say about it. It really caught me flat-footed, and it kind of knocked me off my horse for a couple of weeks trying to figure out what to do with it. So it happens. It's always surprising, and it's always terrible. He left behind, 4 kids and a wife. And, I don't know.
I feel bad asking questions to follow that up, just because it's, such a serious moment. It needs to hang there. But I still want to talk about the topic and try to help and try to raise awareness to, I don't have a lot of listeners, but maybe somebody listening has an idea, has some way to help. I appreciate the realism that there's no magic bullet, though, right? There's no single solution, I think, that's going to solve the situation. And I'm also here. I didn't know. I mean, we're not going over specific stats, but your impression will say that SEALs in particular have a especially high rate of veteran suicide. I didn't know that, and so that's interesting to learn. And it makes me wonder: do you feel like there's something? I think society kind of knows. We talk about it. There's articles about it. Men in general are not great about sharing their troubles, sharing their feelings. Is there something in particular psychologically about teams veterans that prevents, if they're having troubles, sharing troubles, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and we've been trying to break that paradigm for a while. Like when I first came in, it was, a big thing. You don't ever talk to the psych. Like, you just don't talk to the psych, because as soon as they put a little notch in your record that says you've got some kind of head issue, they're going to pull you off the line and you can't go back out. So, that was kind of the fear earlier in my career. Then later on in my career, we tried to fight it. Like, hey, everyone has to talk to psych no matter what at these periodic times of the year. And I think it's gotten better as far as that goes, while guys are active. But most of the time when people are killing themselves, it's not while they're active. It's usually on the backside when they retire, and they kind of went off to this area and a little bit, they're isolated, and that's what team guys want to do. Like, I can't stand crowds to this day. I have a really hard time with them, just too busy, seeing what's going on around me to really stop and enjoy the venue. So a lot of guys end up going in these like more remote locations, and they're cut off from their normal support network. And I just think that it's an issue that, I don't know. It's hard to get after. It's hard to pinpoint, but we're working on it.
No, it makes sense. I feel like there's a number of different orgs out there trying to, foundations and charities trying to do something about veteran suicide. And given the scope of the problem, I think that's morally correct. But I can't help but wonder, is the fact that there's so many of them working against the cause? Do you think that more of a centralization in charities around veteran suicide would help? Or, as is the case with your organization, because the group you're trying to help is very different from others. Do we need the specialization of these different charities? I mean, that's always the question, right? Centralization versus specialization.
Yeah, and in general, there are some times where economies of scale are the answer, but I'm a capitalist as far as this goes. Let the best organizations rise to the top, and then let the ones that aren't doing what they're supposed to with their funds get caught and go away. Because at the end, that's what happens. If you have this centralization, what happens, centralization, bureaucracy, waste. There's all these, there starts to be, you heard of the Peter Principle, which is, it's a book written in the 50s about people that as they promote to their level of incompetence. I actually love that book because I see that so true in these large organizations. And, I like the smaller, faster, sleeker organizations. We can do a one-on-one approach for all of our guys. We have 14 approved candidates and 3 pending right now. So I have time to go one at a time, and I get to know these guys, figure out what they need. And, we got time. We're not in a super hurry. We've got usually 6 months to a year, leveraging some of the programs that are coming out from the military. A great one, they've got the SOCOM Care Coalition Fellowship and the Skill Bridge, 2 programs where they continue to pay our service members for 6 months while they do internships. And, they can do an internship with us, and then we can farm them out, do our contacts, and they can work multiple different internships. Like if you went someplace, let's just say you went to a business and you used your internship. I don't want to put a bad label on any specific business, but you got there and you hated it. That's it. You're stuck there. But not if you do it with us. We'll farm you there for 2 months. You're like, hey, this isn't right for me. Okay, we'll bring you back, figure out what wasn't right, talk to that employer, push you over to another partner, maybe in a different industry, to give you kind of that breadth of experience to figure out what you want. So there's opportunity for us that we're trying to cash in on.
That makes sense. And I particularly like your point about, larger organizations tolerating, creating, whatever it is, bureaucracy. Smaller organizations, it's harder to hide if you are not a competent player in a smaller organization. And so maybe that's a good way to think about when we're talking about something as serious as stopping veteran suicide, helping veterans get placed in civilian sector. Maybe smaller is better. Maybe my impression about, central getting in the way is, while it may have some truth to it, it's ultimately false, because that nimbler organization really is going to serve the needs of their various communities better. So I think that's a interesting perspective.
Suicide is a very personal thing. And I think you need a personal approach. If there's hey, call this hotline to some guy you never talked to in your life, I don't know. I'm not saying that's the wrong approach, but I think for most people, I wouldn't want to call someone and just vent. That's just not the way I am. But if you got a small network of people that know you, and they can start to see, because what I've seen with resilience in general is that there's certain times you can predict times where resilience is going to be lower. It just seems to be around the holidays. People, they start to reflect more. They have more time off. Or, hey, big life changes. Hey, this guy's he's going into retirement. Or, hey, they just went through a divorce. Or they had a parent die or a kid sick. You can tell when it's going to be lower. And, if you know the people well enough to know when those times are coming up in their lives, maybe you can focus a little bit of attention. And that's where I think the bureaucratic, large, centralized organization is going to fail, where I think a smaller, nimbler group that we know a couple of folks, we know them well enough. Hey, this guy's struggling. Let's, we don't have to show up with the intervention task force and kick his door in, but maybe a phone call to make sure he knows it matters. I actually have a very specific example. When I was in Virginia Beach doing some work. What was I doing? I think I was watching a change of command for a phenomenal mentor of mine. He's still active, so I won't say his name, but first name's Mark. And I was up there watching his change of command, and that night I get a phone call, and it was from a friend of mine, super accomplished, amazing SEAL Master Chief, he's just retired. And he's like, hey, Jim, I'm just calling you to say goodbye. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, I think I'm done. I was like, where are you? He goes, well, I'm in Virginia Beach because I live in San Diego. I was like, you know what? I'm in Virginia Beach. Where? He gave me the address to his hotel, and I just went. I'm not a doctor. I don't know what to say, but I got there. I'm like, what's your plan for this? And I guess he had some pills, and I'm like, where are they? Let me get them. And then it was Saturday night on the East Coast, at like 10 p.m. I didn't know where to go. So I just stayed in his room. I'm like, I'm staying here. Like, I'll sleep right here on the floor. And I called another Master Chief who's a buddy of mine named Steve. I'm like, yeah, just come here. I just need help. I don't know what to do. I can't get a hold of the psych right now. It's late. So he came over and he was able to, like, we could hang out with him while we worked to get a hold of some like professional help, because I'm not a professional. And, he ended up, when the psych finally did get here, I would just stayed outside the door to make sure everything was tight. And then when he was like, hey, Jimmy can leave, and the psych he goes, hey, he said you could leave. It's okay now. So I just stayed there I didn't know what to do, but I'm so happy I was able to be there, and I think that's something you wouldn't be able to do in a large bureaucratic organization.
Yeah, that's a powerful story. I think that your willingness to, well, the luck that you were in town, and then your willingness to just go, that may be a more common mindset in your world, but I think a lot of us would be like, I'm not an expert. I'll call somebody.
Yeah.
But in that circumstance, maybe just going is the right, forget calling somebody, just have somebody to be there and talk and talk somebody off a cliff. I remember a picture well before my time, but of Muhammad Ali talking a man off a ledge. Obviously not a psychiatrist, right? I mean, one of the greatest boxers ever, maybe the greatest, but not a psychiatrist. But he talked a man off a ledge. And I don't know all the details of that story, but to me, that's always been powerful, because it just, sometimes I think people just need a human connection, and the ability that you were able to provide that, I think is just wonderful. I hope your friend's still here. He changed his mind maybe permanently, I hope.
Last week, he had to miss my retirement because his wife got sick. So he missed my retirement. But he's still with us. And, to my knowledge, doing pretty well. I haven't talked to him in the last probably 2 weeks. But
Good. In there, within that story, you mentioned about resilience, and I think that yours is a profession that probably requires more than average, mental resilience, physical as well, but mental resilience. And I often think of resilience as a reservoir. And if you've got a long career and it gets tapped and tapped and tapped, as we're talking about this, do you think that part of the cause, whether specific to teams members or more broadly to veterans, is they get out after a career of tapping that reserve and it's just empty? And then now we got civilian life and it's not getting refilled by things, not having that purpose like we talked about, or not having an engagement with a job that they're enjoying or something like that. So they're not filling up their reserve, and it's already low when they get out, and they just, that resilience reserve gets tapped out? Or I don't know. I'm not a psychologist either, but I'm just kind of amateur hour over here. What do you think about that concept of a potential cause?
Yeah, that reserve metaphor is straight out of Lieutenant Colonel Grossman's book On Killing, where he talks about, like, basically everyone has a cup, and, like, at some point that cup gets full, and you have to find ways to empty that cup, but it's never going to go all the way back empty. So very familiar with that kind of thought process. And I've seen it on deployments. I've seen when guys, some gets a little too close to home and you never see it coming. One of, the greatest warriors that I've ever fought alongside, Chris Kyle, they did a movie about him called American Sniper. He took a round to the helmet one day and his cup was a little bit full. It took a while to, I don't want to get too far down in the weeds about that, but his cup was full and I couldn't get it full in time to get him back onto the battlefield. So we had to send him home for a little bit, and that's one of the greatest warriors I've ever worked alongside. And, I think he's got like 235 confirmed kills and just really marvelous battle record, multiple bronze or silver stars and bronze stars. I even saw him struggle with it. And that surprised me because I don't know. His nickname was a legend. To get a nickname in the teams like the legend, I don't know. You got to be pretty good. Like everyone has stupid nicknames in the teams, like, oh, this is Dingleberry, or hey, I'm Jimmy Whiskers is what my nickname was. But you never get a cool nickname. But he got the legend, and for his cup to get full, it definitely caught me flat-footed. So if it can happen to a man of that stature, it can happen to any of us.
So how can somebody like me help? If I meet a veteran, if I meet you, how can I help? Specifically in what we're talking about, how can I help their mind state, their cup fullness level? Not everybody, but nearly everybody. Hey, thanks for your service, etc. But okay, that's verbal, probably a platitude. Some people probably really mean it. Understand what it takes to have a free society, and I'm not trying to turn political. What I'm just trying to ask is like is there a day-to-day thing, or just maybe when you meet somebody, something you think that the average citizen could do to help?
So there's a couple things. So number one, you're not going to save everybody. Like you can't just walk around and like every veteran be like, hey, I'm going to do great things for you. I think what you got to do is you just got to pick, like you probably know somebody. So, number one, kind of reach out on a regular, if you know them on a regular basis. Number two, don't forget the guys who have fallen. Like there's nothing that I appreciate more than someone who remembers our fallen. Like my best friend was a guy named John Tummelson, who was killed on August 6, 2011, was shot down on extortion 1-7. And I was part of the Keiko team, which went and made notification to his family. And, there was a lot of powerful things that happened just doing that. But the point is, a lot of people like stayed in touch with that family. And, a lot of us like continue to work, like, years later, I was a pallbearer at his dad's funeral. And, we just continued that relationship to honor them. And then, the last thing I think is really important is, and our kids are looking for role models and people to be like, and they're exposed to TikTok or whatever else kind of crazy stuff you see going on. And I don't know, I'm definitely dating myself because I don't do a lot of social media outside of LinkedIn. But maybe every now and then on that, if we have like fallen veterans or guys who like on their death anniversary, like, August 6th, every year we all get together and we have beer and we talk about JT. My son, his middle name is John, after John Tummelson, and we just keep those memories alive. And my son knows who he's named after. He knows he's got big shoes to fill, on this planet. And the people I expose him to, I've got at my house here, I've got 2 other houses on this property, and they're both Navy SEALs who are transitioning to live in the other 2 houses, and that's who my son is around. And who my son sees, it's like, hey, this is the kind of people we want to, that we appreciate. And so I think keeping the memory alive, reaching out to people, you don't have to like see someone in the store and grab their phone number. Like, I want to call you 10 times a week, but reaching out to the people that to make sure that network is personal and alive. And then, maintaining those memories in some meaningful way. Cause I love, when we sit down on, August the 6th every year and have a beer, it's a personal thing, and it's a warm thing to remember, JT for who he was and what he gave.
Those are great items. And I think they're all doable. I think that they're not unreasonable asks for the average citizen to do. Because these days, I mean, please.
I got before from a group out of, I was working with the entrepreneurs organization group. They call themselves Return of the Masterminds out at MIT. And I was doing some work with them. And they asked me this same question. And I told them the same thing, like, hey, remember these guys, reach out to somebody if you know them, and then finally do something nice for somebody else. And those guys, they got together, guys and gals, they got together and they raised, I think, $7,000 and went through Guardian Revival, and they bought a service dog for a veteran. And they called me after they got it set up, and they're like, hey, we want you to name it, and name it after JT. I was like, all right, well, JT's nickname was JT Money. So, we got down with the guys and we named the dog Money. And then it turned out that dog went to a guy who actually knew JT, went at his squadron at the same command that JT was at. So it was really cool the way that worked out. And I really haven't seen a group take something to heart as well as those guys at Return of the Masterminds. And that's a guy named Brian Brault and in the Entrepreneurs Organization. And they just did a great job setting it up. So that was a perfect example of how to really show some appreciation. It meant a lot to me, and it's going to mean a lot to this veteran who has a service dog now for him and his family.
That's awesome. And well, that brings up another question. I think and this is definitely not on the list of stuff I talked to you in advance because it's totally out of what you just said. A lot of data showing that real service animals can make huge differences in people's mental health. But not everybody's in a position to have a service animal either because of costs or because of where they're living or whatever. But do you feel like maybe that's an underappreciated tactic that I know it's a weird one that maybe it's not fully in your wheelhouse, but it just, to me, I know that service animals can make major differences in people's mental health. Should more of us be looking at that maybe?
You know what? You're right. It's not in my wheelhouse. I don't know.
Fair enough.
I really don't know. But I know guys that have service animals that swear by it. They take them everywhere they go, and it's a great companion for these guys. One guy in particular, he was a Delta operator forever, and just I actually hired him when I was XO to come teach the young SEALs coming up, because I like to get a guy like that. He's just a phenomenal dude. And he's got a service animal, and he's had that thing for years and years, and it's very important to him. So it is powerful. I don't know the science behind it, and I don't really have anything other to add because it's just not my wheelhouse.
No, that's fair enough. And I always appreciate somebody who is able to say what they don't know and whatever. Just my gut latched onto that when you told that story about that group buying that service dog. And it's like, man, maybe that's some way to help people out there, because it gives you not only a companionship, but it gives you responsibility. And I think a lot of people will hang on longer if they've got responsibilities. And so, versus if you're alone or something like that. So I don't know. Okay. So let me go back to, kind of in the tail end of our time here. And let me go back to trying to blend then the conversation about vets moving out of the military, soldiers moving out of the military, and the veteran suicide issue, and go back to that concept of purpose. How can private enterprise compete with, I watched Tim Kennedy's, I don't think it's technically his, but I know he's a Green Beret, not a SEAL, but his documentary about getting folks out of Afghanistan.
Really impressive dude. Yeah.
Yeah. And I watched his documentary about getting folks out of Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And when you talk purpose, it's like, oh my God. What private enterprise could compete with the type of purpose that somebody like him or somebody like you has done for 20 plus years? How do we compete?
Well, different things are going to resonate with different guys. Like I said, the one size fits none approach is not the answer. But, there's going to be people that find, purpose in becoming a doctor, or, bringing edible foods to people from I guess all foods are edible, in growing edible landscaping, or, there's going to be, like, for me, my whole purpose the first half of my life was doing bad things to bad people. And now I want to do good things for good people. It's completely changed, but it means a lot to me. And that's the mantra I live by. And I do lots of work for lots of different companies. And when they call me, I don't even talk price. I'm like, no, I want to do that. Like, we'll figure out the cost later. If I decide I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. It might be free. If you can pay, it might be money. There's other people that I turned down. A guy wanted to pay me $20,000 to do something with him and his kids. And I just didn't like him. I was like, this guy is, we were out having lunch, and then he got a little drunk and was trying to pick up these ladies. And I was just like, this is not that there's anything wrong with picking up girls, but the way he was doing it, it just, I didn't want to be associated with it. I'm like, I don't have to be associated with stuff I don't want to be associated with anymore,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, that makes sense. Okay. So we've talked about, purpose. We've talked about vets finding work. We've talked about Beyond the Brotherhood, and what you do. We've talked about veteran suicide and some really powerful stories on that front. And we've talked about small versus large scale in charity. So we've covered a lot of ground, as well as what civilians can do to try to help. Do you feel like I've missed anything? I don't deal with this like you do. This is me trying to branch out from doing my podcast. It's mostly healthcare into other topics that I just find interesting and powerful. Have we missed anything that's an important message you want to get out there to people?
I think the only thing that I would like to add to the whole conversation is that, these guys are out there fighting right now. There's people all around the world. And, whether you agree with what our politics are or not, these guys are on the ground doing what they're supposed to do in the worst areas of the world. And, guys and gals out there fighting right now, thousands of them. And they're keeping their mouth shut, doing what they're supposed to do. And, I would just say, remember them in some meaningful way, whatever that is to you. Maybe someone who joined and they're overseas, and shoot them an email or write them a letter or send them a care package. It's awesome when you're overseas. And, I love getting hot sauce overseas, because it just was like a great thing for me, because I'm in some country eating some kind of weird food that maybe I like, maybe I don't, but a little bit of hot sauce always went a long way to kind of cheer my day up. So whatever it is that you guys, if you know people overseas, don't forget them, and reach out to them and see what you can do. And there was also like these teachers had this letter writing campaign they wanted to do with it. So I linked them up, and with my platoon, and we were just write letters to them, and they sent us these things called flat Stanleys. And basically, flat Stanley, you're supposed to send it to like somebody in a job, and they'll take them to work with them that day, and then you're supposed to send flat Stanley back with his story. Well, we took flat Stanley on an operation. Like, we put him in our body armor, and then like we decorated him with like grenades and all, like not real grenades, like pictures of grenades and stuff all over him, and we sent him back. And we're like, this is probably not the way that we should have done it, but we had like flat Stanley, like apprehended two high level terrorists in this network. And, it was a really cool thing to and then the kids started writing us letters, and it was kind of cool being involved, like having those little roots, touch points back to America. And who knows, maybe one of those kids will turn out to get into some kind of one of our military organizations.
That's awesome. And I've heard Flat Stanley, and I think that's probably the best Flat Stanley story I've ever heard. So
this Flat Stanley's been around. We took them on a few ops. It was pretty cool.
Let me get in the weeds for a moment. Care packages. Do you have to know somebody to send it to, or are there organizations where I could just go and put together something and give it, and they pick somebody somewhere, where I can just support that? Because I don't know. At my age, a lot of vets I know, and I do know some, they're not special forces vets, but they've moved on. They're either retired from the military, or they did, 8 years or whatever and got out, and they're in civilian life for a decade or more now. So I don't know anybody active duty. So and there's probably a lot of people out there like me. How can I go out there, and maybe if I don't know somebody, but still want to do the care package idea, because I love that idea.
Yeah, there are organizations out there, but I think it's a little bit blind when you do that. I would say, I've had a teacher reach out to me last week, and she's like, hey, she hit me on the website, and she's like, my class wants to get involved with the SEAL platoon. I'm like, easy. I called up my buddy who's running SEAL Team 1 now, and then he's like, put him in touch with the platoon, and now they're going to do some kind of letter writing with this 7th grade class. But I think that reach out to somebody. You got to know a vet somewhere. There's someone that, or reach out on a website like, hey, I'm just interested in finding a unit that's overseas and, doing something nice for them. And it doesn't have to be expensive, or say, send me a couple bottles of hot sauce. And I was, pretty stoked on that. And, I think the personal approach is the way to go. I wouldn't just drop it into an organization. That's what I think.
That's good input and good advice. And when we're off the call, I might pick your brain on that a little bit. So I appreciate it. Well, Jimmy May, Commander, retired U.S. Navy, Navy SEAL, thank you for spending some time with me, educating me about what you're doing now, about Beyond the Brotherhood, about veteran suicide. I hope somebody out there is influenced. If you're a vet and you're having trouble, I hope that you feel comfortable reaching out to somebody, to Jimmy, to me, to somebody, whoever, just, reach out. And if you're not a vet and you're not having trouble, but you know one, use those tips that Jimmy said. Stay in touch. Keep them in your thoughts. Try to keep them, in particular, keep in touch. I think that's the main thing. That community is what I've heard through the whole the subtext of the conversation today. So, Jimmy, how can people find you and your organization? I know you said it earlier, but one more time for everybody.
Yeah, we're at beyondthebrotherhood.org. And if you forget and type in .com, we own the domain and it'll kick you to .org. So not a big deal. And then if you want to contact me for something, I do good things for good people, whatever that is, hit me up. It'll go right to my email. And I usually get back to it in a day or two. And I'm looking forward to continuing our share of the task here. And if there's people that want to be our partners, man, come on, we're ready.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here on No Bad Questions.
All right. Thanks, David.